I never expected a simple cardboard box to change everything I thought I knew about my life or about myself. For years it sat untouched in the attic of my childhood home, gathering dust like every other forgotten piece of a life that ended the day my mother died. I only went back because the attorney insisted there were personal belongings I should review. I assumed he meant documents, maybe some old clothes. I wasn't prepared for what I found. The attic smelled exactly as I remembered. Wood, humidity, and that faint trace of mildew that clings to closed places. I pulled the light chain, and the bulb flickered awake, casting weak yellow light over the mess. That's when I saw it. A box marked in my mother's handwriting. Keep for him. Not my name. Not even an initial. Just him. At first I laughed under my breath. My mother had always been sentimental. She kept everything. But when I opened the box, the laughter stopped cold in my throat. Inside were photographs. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. Some were loose, some still in the envelopes from the 1-hour photo labs that no longer exist. All of them were from my early childhood. Birthdays, park visits, the first day of school, Christmas mornings. Things I remembered, and things I didn't. But it wasn't the photos themselves that disturbed me. It was the man. He appeared in nearly every picture. Not front and center. Not smiling with us. No, he was always in the background. Sometimes half hidden behind a tree. Sometimes standing on the sidewalk. Sometimes blurred, as if he moved right when the picture was taken. Sometimes staring directly into the camera. A man I had never seen before in my life. At first, I thought I must have been mistaken. Maybe he was a neighbor, a friend of the family, someone I simply didn't remember. But the more photos I pulled out, the more impossible it became to explain. His face never aged. Not from when I was 3, to when I was 7, to when I was 9. He looked exactly the same. Same dark coat. Same expressionless face. Same unsettling stillness. I felt my chest tighten as I flipped through the photos faster, my hands beginning to tremble. The man wasn't always obvious at first glance, but once I spotted him in one picture, I couldn't unsee him in all the others. It was like he was following us, watching me. The worst part? My mother had circled him in nearly every photo, with a red pen, and written one word underneath. Why? That was the moment I sat down on the dusty attic floor because my legs simply stopped supporting me. My hands were damp. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't nostalgia. This wasn't family history. This was something else. Something darker. Something my mother didn't want to forget, or maybe something she wanted me to discover only when she was gone. As I dug deeper into the box, I found more than photos. There were clippings from old newspapers about missing children. Some from our town, others from nearby counties. On some of the articles she had scribbled dates, arrows, question marks. And then I found something that made my blood turn cold. A small notebook. My mother's handwriting filled the pages. He showed up again today. He was standing across the street when I picked him up from school. How does he always know where we are? I tried asking the neighbors. No one else sees him. Am I losing my mind? Or is he here for my son? I closed the notebook and sat in silence, listening to the creaking house around me. For a moment, I thought I could hear breathing. A faint, slow inhale from somewhere behind me. I turned, but the attic was empty. Still, I felt watched. As I collected the scattered photos back into the box, something caught my eye. One picture I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't circled. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't even taken by my mother. At least I don't think it was. I was sitting at a park bench, maybe 5 or 6 years old, eating ice cream. But the angle was wrong. The photo was taken from far away, through what looked like a fence, zoomed in as though someone had been hiding while taking it. And behind me, standing only a few feet away, was the man. This time, he wasn't looking at the photographer. He was looking at me. My heart pounded against my ribs so violently I thought it might break them. I flipped the photo over. There was a date written in black marker, but not my mother's handwriting. A different one. Sharper, colder, masculine. The date was 3 days before a little girl from my school had gone missing. A girl whose face I still remembered because her posters had been everywhere for months. A girl whose case was never solved. And suddenly, I remembered something I had buried deep under the weight of time. A shadow standing behind the playground fence. A figure I thought was a tree trunk at the time. A voice my mother told me to ignore. My fingers went numb as I held the photograph. My mouth was dry, my breath uneven. This wasn't a stranger who appeared by accident. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't a family friend or a harmless passerby. This was someone who had been there for me, for reasons I didn't understand, and maybe my mother never did either. But she had kept all of this. She had circled him. She had asked why. And she had left the box for me, almost like she wanted me to finish what she started. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The tick of the clock, the groan of the floorboards, the whisper of wind against the windows. I kept seeing his face in my mind, still and silent, watching from a distance. Around 3 a.m., unable to bear the silence anymore, I went back to the box and took out all the photos with him in them. I laid them on the floor in chronological order. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. He was getting closer. Not drastically, not enough to frighten anyone at a glance. But picture by picture, year after year, the man in the background had moved a few feet closer to me. Until the last photo, the one from the park bench where he stood almost right behind me, felt like my stomach dropped into ice water. Someone knocked on the front door. 3 soft knocks. 3 in the morning. I froze. My whole body locked in place. The knocks came again, a little louder this time. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. A third set of knocks. Slow, deliberate, patient. I looked at the photos scattered across the floor. And for a moment, just a horrible, fleeting moment, I swear the man in the last photo looked closer than he had an hour before. I forced myself to stand, to walk to the window, to look outside. And under the dim streetlight stood a silhouette, tall, still, unmoving, watching the house, watching me. I shut the curtain and backed away, pulse roaring in my ears. I didn't answer the door. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. At sunrise, the figure was gone. But something inside me had changed. I needed answers. I needed to know who that man was, and why he had followed me my entire childhood. The photographs weren't enough. My mother's notes weren't enough. If I wanted answers, I would have to dig deeper, into her past, into the town's history, and into secrets I never knew my family kept. And I had no idea then how horrifying the truth would turn out to be. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him again, the man in the photo. Not moving, not blinking, just there, frozen in time next to the 5-year-old version of me. A presence that didn't belong. A shadow that somehow felt aware of me even after all these years. By the time the sun came up, I had already made a decision. I needed answers. I started by calling my mom. She answered with her usual warm tone, but I couldn't bring myself to say it immediately. How do you tell someone, hey, why is there a creepy adult man standing next to me in a photo you've never seen before? So I sent her the picture. Silence on the other end. Mom, she inhaled sharply. Where did you get that? A box I found in the attic. Another long silence. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. I've never seen this man in my life. And, sweetheart, that picture shouldn't exist. My heart kicked in my chest. What do you mean it shouldn't exist? That outfit, she whispered. You wore it only once. Your 5th birthday. I took pictures, but none of them look like this. I waited. She continued, and look at him. He's not in any of my photos. I would remember a stranger standing next to my child. I felt my throat tighten. So someone else took it? No, she said. That background. That's our yard. I took all the pictures that day. No one else was there. Her voice cracked. How did he get into that picture? I didn't have an answer. She didn't either. And that terrified both of us. I spent hours studying the photo again. Zooming in, sharpening details, analyzing shadows like a detective who didn't know what he was looking for. The man wore outdated clothes, but not old enough to belong to the 90s. More like early 2000s. His hair, his jeans, even the cut of his jacket, they didn't match the time period of my childhood. As if he didn't come from my past. As if he came from a different one. And yet, the picture looked authentic. There was no sign of Photoshop, no strange pixelation. The lighting on him matched the lighting on me. The shadows lined up. The angle matched. He wasn't pasted in. He was there. In the exact moment the picture was taken. But how? And why? That night, curiosity or maybe fear pushed me deeper. I took the whole box downstairs and spread every photograph across the living room floor. Hundreds of memories, years of my life, messy and scattered like puzzle pieces. And then I saw it. Another clue. In a different picture. One I'd seen 1,000 times before. There was something in the background I had never noticed. A shape, a silhouette, a person standing far behind a fence. Out of focus, as if trying to avoid being captured, but failing. A cold shiver slid down my spine. It was him. Same jacket, same build, same posture. He wasn't just in one of my childhood photos. He'd been there all along. Hidden, distant, watching. I kept searching through the pile, pulse hammering. Another photo, this time from a school event. I was 7 years old, holding a trophy. And behind the crowd of parents and teachers, a man half visible standing behind a tree. My lungs tightened. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a coincidence. He had been following me through my childhood. Documented in photos I never realized were evidence. But how had no one ever noticed him? Why did he always appear half-hidden, half-formed, half-present? And why did all these clues surface only now? I decided to talk to someone who might know something, my grandmother. She remembered everything about everyone. If some adult man had ever hovered near our family, I trusted she would know. I showed her the first photo. She stared at it for a long time, her eyebrows lowering. "I recognize you," she said slowly. "And that's your backyard, yes?" She paused. "But I don't recognize him. He doesn't look like anyone we knew. And yet..." She leaned closer. "He looks familiar." "How can he look familiar if you don't know him, Grandma?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood up, walked to her old wooden cabinet, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thick, dusty family album. One I'd never seen before. She flipped through the pages. Photos of my parents young and newly married, pictures of my grandmother's siblings, family gatherings, old houses we no longer lived in. Then she froze. Her hand trembled. She turned the album toward me, and my body went cold. There he was, the same man, standing at the edge of a photograph of my parents' wedding 20 years before I was born. Not close to anyone, not smiling, not interacting, just present, as if observing, as if waiting, as if he didn't belong in that time either. My grandmother whispered, "That man, he was in a few photos back then too. I always thought he was a guest of your father's side of the family. But when I asked, no one knew him. He never spoke, never approached anyone. He just wandered in the background." I felt my mouth go dry. How is this possible? My grandmother shook her head. "I don't know, sweetheart. But he looks exactly the same." She was right. No aging, no wrinkles. The same hair, same height, same expression. The same man who stood next to me when I was 5 was also standing in my parents' photos decades earlier. Time made no difference to him. He was untouched by it. That's when fear morphed into something darker. Obsession. Over the next few days, I scanned every single photo he appeared in. I zoomed, enhanced, compared. I created a timeline and pinned the prints to my wall like a detective in a crime show. And then I noticed a pattern. He was always there during moments of transition. My parents' wedding, my 5th birthday, my first school award, my grandmother's 60th birthday party. He never appeared during ordinary days, only during life-changing milestones, as if he was following fate itself, or guarding it. But there was something else, something even more disturbing. In each photo, he was always looking in the same direction. Not at me, not at my parents, not at anyone at the event. He was looking beyond the frame, as if something or someone was standing just outside the picture. Something I couldn't see, something he could. The realization gnawed at me like a parasite. He wasn't following me. He was following whatever was following me. I needed expert help. So I contacted a professional photo analyst, someone who specialized in forensic imaging. I sent him 3 photos and asked only one question. Is the man the same person in all these pictures? His response came the next morning. Yes, 100% match. Same bone structure, same ratios, same asymmetry in the jawline. The chances that these are different people are statistically 0. I felt sick. And the timestamps? I asked. He replied, that's the weird part. These photos come from different decades, but the man's biological age remains unchanged. Unless he's a time traveler or a ghost, this shouldn't be possible. I closed the email. Time traveler or ghost. I wasn't ready to accept either, but the evidence said otherwise. That night, I spread all the photos on the floor again and sat in the middle, surrounded by the stranger's silent presence. I stared into his unmoving eyes, asking him questions he would never answer. Why me? Why my family? Why my entire life? What did he want? What did he know? And then something clicked, something I had overlooked. In each photo, the stranger wasn't looking directly at me, but he always stood in the space where another person should have been. My father in the wedding picture, my mother in the birthday photo, a cousin in the school event, my grandmother in her party portrait. Every time someone should have been beside me or behind me, the stranger appeared instead. He wasn't photobombing. He was replacing someone who never showed up, or someone who shouldn't be there. And then a terrifying thought formed in my head. What if he wasn't following me? What if he was protecting me? From what? I didn't know yet, but I was about to find out. Because as I was gathering the photos, one slipped from my hand and fell face down. And on the back, written faintly in pencil, in handwriting I didn't recognize, there was a message, a date, and one sentence. He comes for you on your 30th birthday. My blood froze. I was 29, and my birthday was in 6 weeks. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear. Fear had already carved its place inside me, like a tenant that no longer needed permission to stay, but because I knew I was one step away from the truth. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, not just the old man from the present day, but the silent stranger who stood behind me in pictures I never remembered being taken. I kept hearing Alice's mother's voice. He asked about boys. Every time. Why? Why me? Why would a man follow a child for years and then vanish? Why would he bury decades of silence under a single sentence? You look just like him. I needed answers. Real ones. Not theories, not guesses. Truth. So at 6 a.m., while the world was still quiet, I drove to the house again. This time I wasn't going in with fear. I was going in with purpose. The neighborhood looked different in the early morning light. Less haunted, more human. Leaves rustled on the ground, and sunlight cut through the fog, laying thin stripes of gold across the street. For a second, if I didn't know better, I could have believed nothing strange had ever happened there. But when I reached the end of the block, the truth slapped me in the face. The old house was gone. Not sold. Not occupied. Gone. Completely torn down. Reduced to an empty lot surrounded by orange construction tape. An excavator sat on the dirt like a fossil from a violent past. Wooden splinters and broken bricks were scattered everywhere, and a sign nailed to a metal post read, "Demolition complete. Property condemned." I froze. They had demolished it. Last night. The same night I left. I walked closer, my chest tightening. Had they known I was inside? Had someone called it in? Or was this demolition planned for weeks, and I had simply chosen the final hours of its existence to enter it? I knelt and touched the dirt where the living room used to be, the place where the photographs were taken, the place where he stood behind me. Gone. All of it gone. A rational person might have accepted that the mystery was destroyed with the house, but I felt something deeper, as if the house wasn't the secret, as if he wasn't tied to wood and brick, as if this demolition was not closure, but a warning. I stood up, brushed the dust off my jeans, and took a deep breath. He was never inside the house. The woman's words came back. He only came here once, but he always stopped children outside the house. Always. Outside, not inside. He wasn't a ghost tied to walls. He wasn't a spirit bound to a location. He had followed me through time, through photos, through moments I never noticed. This was bigger than a haunted property. This was personal. I left the lot and walked to my car. As I reached for the door handle, something caught my eye. A figure, standing across the street, watching me. My blood stopped moving. He wasn't fully visible, just a dark silhouette standing under the shade of a tree. But something about the posture, the stillness, the way he seemed to tilt his head slightly. It was him, or someone who looked painfully similar. I blinked. He was gone, like he had dissolved into the morning air. My heart pounded as I got into the car. My hands shook on the steering wheel, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. Couldn't break now. I was close, too close. I needed to retrace the connection. I needed the original photos. I drove home faster than I should have, grabbed the shoebox of pictures from my closet, and dumped them all onto the living room floor. Photo after photo. Birthday parties, school plays, picnics, Christmas mornings. And him, always in the background, always watching, always just there. But this time I wasn't looking at the pictures for fear. I was looking at them for patterns. In one photo he stood behind a tree. In another, behind a fence. In another, behind my mother's car. Always behind something. Always in shadow. But always facing me. Not my parents. Not the photographer. Me. That's when I noticed something I had never seen before. In every photo, he wasn't just looking in my direction. He was looking directly at me. Even if the angle was impossible. Even if he should have been facing someone else. Even if his body was turned the other way. His eyes were always aligned with mine. I felt sick. This wasn't normal. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't coincidence. He wasn't just appearing in my childhood photos. He was following me, watching me grow, tracking my life. But why? I picked up one picture that had always bothered me more than the others. Not because of him, but because of the setting. It was taken on my 7th birthday. We were at a park. My mother stood behind me, holding my shoulders. And behind her, he was there. But something was different. His expression. In the other photos, he was blank. Emotionless. Observing. But in this one, he looked devastated. Not like a stalker. Not like a ghost. Not like a threat. Like a man breaking apart. His eyes were red, as if he had been crying. His shoulders slumped. His mouth trembled. He wasn't watching me. He was mourning. I stared at the picture, my breath trembling. Why would he look devastated at my 7th birthday? Then I noticed something else. In my mother's hand, barely visible, tucked under her arm, a photograph. Before the phone era, my mother always carried a physical picture of my father. A picture I had seen 1,000 times. He was young, smiling, and unmistakably familiar. My father. I swallowed. No, couldn't be. My father died when I was 2. I had no memory of him. No video. No recordings. Just the stories my mom told me. He died in a car crash. Instantly. No survivor. That was the truth I had been raised with. But the man in my childhood photos wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a stalker. The resemblance I ignored was suddenly undeniable. The jawline, the posture, the eyes. He looked just like my father. My hands began to tremble. I flipped through more pictures. In every one he looked older, more tired, more broken. Not like a man stalking a child. Like a man who desperately wanted to be near someone he loved, but couldn't touch, couldn't speak, couldn't reveal himself. And suddenly, I remembered what the old woman had said. You look just like him. She wasn't talking about a stranger. She was talking about family. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. Was it possible? Could my father have survived? And hidden? Why would he leave? Why would he watch from afar instead of holding me, raising me, loving me? My vision blurred. The front doorbell rang. A violent, sharp, echoing ding that ripped through the house like lightning. I froze. Nobody knew I was home. Nobody visited me unannounced. Nobody should have been there. The bell rang again. Longer. More insistent. I stood up, heart crashing against my ribs, and walked slowly toward the door. My hand hovered over the doorknob. I opened it. No one was there. Just an envelope on the porch. Old. Yellowed. My name handwritten on the front. I picked it up with shaking fingers and brought it inside. The paper crackled as I tore it open. Inside was a letter. Short, shaky handwriting, as if written by someone whose hands trembled constantly. I read it, and everything I believed about my life shattered. I don't remember how long I stayed sitting on the floor, back against the wall, staring at the empty space where the attic door used to slam shut behind me in all my nightmares. My breathing was shallow, my hands shaking. I felt like my entire life had just cracked open, and something old, something that had always been there, finally crawled out into the light. I thought the worst part was finding the truth. I was wrong. The real horror came after, because once you see the truth, it starts following you. But let me go back to the moment everything snapped into place. The man in my childhood photos. The stranger who kept appearing in corners, reflections, windows, behind me while I played. He wasn't a ghost or a stalker or a hallucination. He was my father. Not the man who raised me. Not the man whose last name I carry. Not the man who tucked me into bed every night. No, my biological father. A man I never knew. A man no one ever talked about. A man whose existence had been erased before I was old enough to understand anything about the world. But he had been there, watching me grow, protecting me from a distance, leaving clues no one else ever noticed. And as the truth flooded me, I realized something impossible. He had died before I was even born. That contradiction poisoned my mind for days. I returned to the attic again and again, digging through boxes, old journals, torn documents, hospital records, photos nobody ever meant for me to see. My mother refused to talk about him. Every time I brought up his name, she froze like she was remembering something she'd spent her whole life trying to forget. And then one night she finally broke. She sat at the edge of her bed, fingers gripping the sheets, staring into nothing. "I wanted to protect you," she whispered. "From him. From what he was. From what he could do." I didn't interrupt. I just listened. "He was different," she said. "Things happened around him. Lights flickered. Doors opened. Shadows moved. He knew things. Things he shouldn't have known." Her voice trembled. "When I found out I was pregnant, he told me someone was coming for us. Something. He said you were special, and that they wouldn't let you live." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean, they?" She just shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "I didn't believe him until the night he died." "How did he die?" She hesitated, and that silence told me everything. "He didn't," she finally whispered. "He disappeared." After that conversation, the nightmares returned. But now they weren't nightmares. They were memories. Mine and his. I saw the world through his eyes. A small apartment. A woman crying. A baby wrapped in a blanket. Shadows standing outside the door. Something whispering behind the walls. I woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Felt like he was trying to tell me something. No, warn me. But it wasn't until a week later that I finally understood. I had gone back to the attic one more time, one last time, determined to burn every box and photo so I could finally move on. I was tired of living in fear, tired of feeling watched, tired of waking up with someone else's memories in my head. I stacked everything in the center of the room and struck a match. But before the flame touched the first photo, I froze, because the picture on top wasn't the one I left there. It was new, recent, and in it, I was sleeping in my bed, taken from inside my room, from inches away. Someone had stood over me while I slept. But that wasn't the worst part. Standing behind me in the photo was him. The stranger. My father. No older. No younger. Exactly the same. Not aging. Not changing. Not dead. Just watching. Protecting. Haunting. Existing somewhere between this world and whatever he had been running from. And at the bottom of the photo, written in handwriting that was not mine. Not my mother's, not anyone alive. They found you. I dropped the match. It burned out on the floor. My breath disappeared from my lungs. Because at that moment, the temperature in the attic dropped. And behind me, I heard a footstep. Slow. Deliberate. Close. I turned around. Too afraid to move. Too terrified not to. And there, in the corner, half hidden in shadow, I saw the silhouette of a man. Still. Silent. Watching. His outline flickered like static. My father. Or the thing that used his shape. And for the first time I understood. He hadn't been following me. He had been keeping something else away. Something still looking for me. Something that wanted me since before I was born. Something that was now a very close. He lifted a hand. Like he had in every photo. Like he had in every dream. And pointed behind me. I didn't want to turn around. Every part of my soul screamed don't. But I did. And I saw. Turns black. This is where the video cuts. Where the recording ends. Where the police found my camera. But not me. And if you're watching this now, if you've seen the photos, if you've heard the story, if anything in your room feels colder than it should be, then maybe, just maybe, found you too.